we need to prioritize the physical TBR this year. So I think he's the dad of, what's her name? I love a book that makes me cry. Very few do. One thing about me is I do not like thrillers, and I have this beautiful matcha for Love and Other Words? What is it called? This is one of those cute little tiny books with also not so cute teeny tiny writing, which I think is really sad. So I need to read this. It also has a really cute golden retriever on the cover, so that's just another check. The first book was great. The rest, we don't need them. Hi, and welcome back to my channel. This is Mackenzie Reads. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about my 20 most anticipated books to read in 2026. I thought about doing 26 books, but I thought that that was a little bit overkill. So we're gonna just stick with 20 just because it's a good flat even number. And I'm gonna do a mixture of books that I already have on my shelf. There's a few books that I don't own that I will most likely be purchasing. And then also quite a few books that are going to be new releases. So they will be released in 2026. So we're actually gonna get right into it, and we're gonna start with new releases for 2026. I have Goodreads pulled up, the most popular books that are published in 2026, and I'm gonna just screen record that. All right, so we should be screen recording, so we're just gonna scroll through these. By the way, I got this idea for going onto Goodreads from Destiny Sidwell, which I'm sure you know of her, but she's a very popular booktuber, and she scrolled through this website and it kind of gave me a few books that I didn't have on my radar, but that are definitely now on my radar. And just to preface this, these are books that are like at the very top of my list. Obviously there's going to be other books that I read in 2026. However, these are books that I've been thinking about for a long time, or books that I've been putting off for a long time. So I just made the ultimate decision that 2026 is going to be the year that I read them. Oh, and also make sure before you start watching, you grab your fun little drink. And I have this beautiful matcha. It looks so good with the candy cane nails. Okay, now back to the screen recording. Let's scroll on through. So this first book, The Ballad of Fallen Dragons, this is Moonfall number 2. So this is the second book for When the Moon Hatched, which I've actually not read. That's a book that I do want to read. I don't have it on this list. However, I'm assuming that once I read it, I'm going to want to read this book. I just have a hard time starting series that only have one book out, especially fantasy, because I feel like I have to reread the books each time a new one comes out just because there's so much backstory to them. Ooh, okay, so we've hit our first one. I know for a fact I'm going to be reading The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. So this is Say You'll Remember Me number 2. I kind of recently read Say You'll Remember Me and I was obsessed with it. I just thought it was so realistic of a love story, and I just love Abby Jimenez's writing. She always has cute animals in her books. Her relationships are very real and raw and honest, and the characters contain flaws, and she also always has some sort of chronic illness depiction that I think is done very well. So this kind of looks like the guy that she's dating is not the guy that took her home from the concert, but they are best friends. So it's almost like she wants to be with the best friend, but she's not. So that's a little bit tricky. I don't know if I'm gonna like it, but I mean, so far in terms of the people who've received ARCs, it is rated 4.39, which I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less from Abby Jimenez, and I feel like she's a romance author that kind of broaches that, or exceeds that 4-star ceiling that I think a lot of romance novels have. There's very few romance novels that can bust above that 4 stars into that like 4.5, 5-star range. So I'm intrigued by that one. We're gonna add that one to our list. I do want to read this by B.K. Borison. I'm reading a couple of her books right now. However, I have not read First Time Caller, which is the first book in this series, so I will be reading that one first. But that's not on my list. This book, Red God, so this is Red Rising number 7. and this says it's the 7th and final book in the Red Rising saga, which is very intriguing. I've had the first 3 books of Red Rising on my physical TBR for probably a year, and I've not picked them up. I'm a little bit intimidated. However, I've read a few sci-fi novels this year and I really loved them, and I think that's a genre that I'm definitely like unlocking and walking into. So I'm not going to get to number 7, I'm most likely next year. However, I do think next year will be the year that I start Red Rising. So I didn't pull that one off my shelf, but I do have that book and I think I'm going to add that as number 2 on my list. Keep scrolling. This is my next book that I most likely will be reading, Our Perfect Storm by Carly Fortune. I honestly really loved This Summer Will Be Different, Meet Me at the Lake, and then One Golden Summer. I've read those first 2. I have not read One Golden Summer, which I just missed the window to read it in the summertime, so I think I'll be reading it either this winter if I go on a vacation or next summer for sure when it gets warm out. And then this book I'm assuming comes out when it gets warm too. I don't know, I just like her writing, I like her imagery, I like where her books take place. They're always surrounded by lakes, and I just feel like it's just one of those perfect addictive romance novels. So again, this one's also already rated pretty high among her ARC readers, so I think that that's promising, and we're gonna add that one to our list. One thing about me is I do not like thrillers, so we're going to be scrolling by those, and then this looks like a lot of number 1s in series, which I'm not going to be reading most likely, because if number 1 is just coming out next year, it's going to be a long wait. Some of these I have not read. This series by Carrie Maniscalco I am very interested in. What is the, I don't remember what the first one is called, but I think that it's a fantasy kind of following the princes of hell, so each one is a different prince, and I believe that this is her adult fantasy series, or I think it's her first adult fantasy series, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've not read any of these because again there weren't many out, but I didn't know that the 3rd book was already coming out, so maybe I'll have to add that one, but I'm not going to add it onto my top 20 books. This blows my mind. How is Assistant to the Villain getting a 4th book? I think that that book 100% should have stopped at number 1. I have to be honest, maybe that's an unpopular opinion, but the first book was great. The rest, we don't need them. This is my next most excited book that I'm adding to books that I want to read. This is The Calamity Club by Catherine Stockett. So this will be a fiction release. This is the author of The Help, which is such a good classic book. I read it years ago, and I that's one of my 5-star reads, and I think that honestly everyone should read it. That book also was a historical fiction, which it looks like this one is too. She's such a good writer for women in minority fields at difficult times in history. So obviously The Help is about the help, so it's about maids who lived in the homes of women during the civil rights movement, and this one is the 1933 Prohibition and the Great Depression. It looks like it's also going to follow the same style as The Help and follow multiple women, and what's kind of cool about this one is it also follows an 11-year-old and then also obviously older women just through this tough time in history. I don't know, I kind of want to go in blind, but I love The Help, so I have a feeling that I'm going to also love this book. Keep scrolling. This most likely will be read. I'm not going to add it to my list because it's so easy, but Fever Dream by Elsie Silver. I mean, if she writes it, I'm most likely going to pick it up. I just finished Wild Card, where they mentioned this character, Emmett Bush. And it'll probably be on Kindle Unlimited, so I'm most likely going to be picking that one up, so I don't need to add that to my list. Okay, this is my next one, Just Friends by Haley Pham. I'm sure you already know this, but if you don't, Haley Pham is a YouTuber, and this is her first ever book. So she wrote a childhood friends to lovers dual timeline romance novel. This will be her first release. I believe it comes out in April, and I'm just super excited to read this. This is so cool to see somebody who I've followed, I don't know, I think I've been watching her channel since I was like 15, 16. And just to watch how she's evolved and grown, and now she's obviously talking mostly about books, whereas when I first started it was mostly like lifestyle growing up as a teenager, and now she's written her own book, which is, it's just cool to see people fulfill their dreams. So that one is definitely going to be added to my list, and I most likely will be buying that like the day that it comes out. Okay. I really want to read Silver Elite, and I didn't know that the second book was coming out, so I'll have to think about that one. I don't think no, I don't own that book. We need to prioritize the physical TBR this year. Also, the finale to Bridge Kingdom is coming out next year. I've only read the first book of Bridge Kingdom, and I own the second book, which I definitely want to get into. It was a little bit intimidated just because of how long the book series was, but if it stops at 6, that's not really too bad. Those books are pretty short. This is a good Kindle Unlimited series, the Vancouver Storm series, if you want to read hockey romance. And I guess number 5's coming out next year. Okay, this is my next book, In Her Own League by Liz Tom Ford. I'm sure you guys have heard of this, but this is kind of like a spin-off of the Windy City series, so that would be Mile High, Right Move, Play Along, those books. They're sports romances. They take place in Chicago, and this one is about the dad. So this is about Emmett. So I think he's the dad of, what's her name? Miller. So he's the dad of Miller, who she was in my favorite book, Play Along. I believe it's Play Along with Isaiah Rhodes. And ever since they've showed Emmett, I knew that he needed a book. And now it's kind of like this forbidden romance where Reese, actually, she's the female main character. She is the first female owner of an MLB team. So that's really cool. So that is their love story. So I'm definitely adding that one to my list. There's one more book that I saw on here that I want to read. Let's find it. Oh, there it is. Okay, Happy Ending by Chloe Leese. I don't know if she's written any other books, but the reason why I am going to be adding this to my list is that it's perfect for fans of Christina Lauren and Annabelle Monaghan, which I'm obsessed with Christina Lauren for Love and Other Words? What is it called? Yeah, Love and Other Words, probably one of my favorite romance novels. Annabelle Monaghan, probably one of my favorite romance authors. Even the title is very much like Emily Henry, Annabelle Monaghan-esque, just being called Happy Ending, and it looks like it's like a fake dating trope. Just like a classic good romance read, and I'm always looking for new books like that. So I'm going to add that one to my list, and I will most likely be purchasing that as well. It also has a really cute golden retriever on the cover, so that's just another check. The next thing we're going to do is talk about the books that I actually own, or books that have already been released that I am 100% certain I'm going to be purchasing next year to read. And we're going to start off with a couple books just 2 books that I don't own. The first one is Finding Grace by Loretta Rothschild. I have only heard great things about this. I've heard you need to go in blind. I've heard that the first chapter is kind of like jaw-dropping. You have to reread it multiple times just to kind of see what's happening. I think it's a fiction book. It's a debut novel. I've seen, if you watch Chris and Mads podcast, they did an author interview with Loretta Rothschild, and I just need this book in my brain. So we're adding that one to the list. So the next book that I don't own is called The Bright Years by Sarah DeMoff. I want to read this book specifically because of Sarah Caroli on YouTube. I think this is going to end up being her favorite book of the year. From my understanding, it's a fiction novel that explores a lot of different and troubled family dynamics. It's definitely a genre of fiction that I like to read about. I think it follows addiction, loss, and it's told from the perspective of multiple people. I think that there's a little bit of, just like finding yourself. There's generational trauma. And I think that there's like some sort of like big secret in this book that I'm trying to get to the bottom of. And again, this is a debut novel, which is funny. So my 2 that I don't own are both debut novels. So the next book that I'm adding is The Bright Years by Sarah DeMoff. Now we're gonna move on to books that I actually own physical copies of, and hopefully we can do this before my camera dies. So the first book, I guess technically this is like adding a trilogy to my list. However, I don't care. I'm going to be reading Beartown by Frederick Bachman. I've only heard good things about this book. As you can see, I've actually read a little bit of it. I think last winter I read chapter 10, so I read 70 pages, and then I stopped reading, not because the book is bad, but because it just wasn't the right time for me to be reading this. And I just think, I know it has to do with ice hockey, and it's in this small town. I don't know where the town is, but I picture in like the middle of Alaska. Pretty sure I'm wrong. But anyways, this is a trilogy that I need to read. I know it's heartbreaking. I think I kind of have been spoiled the big thing that happens in this book, just because there is that TV show, but I really want to read Frederick Bachman's writing. And then if I love this series, I also own My Friends by him, and I want to add that to my list because that's been recommended to me by multiple people, both in my personal life and then also online. So we're adding the Beartown trilogy, but at least the first Beartown. And then the next book we have is Tuesdays with Morrie. This book I think is gonna make me cry, which I love a book that makes me cry. Very few do. It's a very short read. Like, look at how big the margins are. But I think that this is essentially an old man, a young man, and life's greatest lesson. This is a book that I've heard that everybody needs to read. It's just an older man giving life lessons and advice to a younger man. I don't think it's through letters, but I think it's just through good conversation, and I 100% want to read this, and I think that I just want to be one of the people who has inserted this into my brain. The next book we have is an epic fantasy, and that is The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wong. So this is a thick ass book. I got this book for Christmas last year. I asked for it and I have not read it. And I think that since it's been a full year, I 100% need to get to it. I'm trying my hardest to read Blood Over Bright Haven, which is also by M.L. Wong, this month, so in December. That's on my December TBR. And so I've heard nothing but great things about these two books. And I've also heard that they can potentially become your favorite books of the year. So that's why I want to read them in separate years. So at least if this is my favorite book and Blood Over Bright Haven is my favorite book, they were read in separate years. So I 100% want to get to this book. And I really want to get more into my epic fantasy journey. Speaking of epic fantasy, we're reading Game of Thrones. I have all 5 of the books. This is The Song of Ice and Fire, I believe. Is that what the first one's called? Yeah. A Song of Ice and Fire. So this is book 1, another thick book. This is one of those cute little tiny books with also not so cute teeny tiny writing and absolutely no margins at all. And this book is over 800 pages. Yeah, it's like 830 pages. I'm going to be reading this with the Chris and Mads Patreon book club in January. They're reading this and then they're going to watch the first season, which is so fun. And I've been waiting for an excuse to actually read these books. And I think reading it in January is just so cozy, and well, I don't really know if there's anything cozy about Game of Thrones. I have watched the whole series through, so I kind of have an idea, but I know for a fact the book is going to deliver so much more than the series did. And that's a good series, so that's saying a lot. So we're going to add Game of Thrones. Now we're going to move on to 2 classics that I've had for multiple years that I absolutely need to read. The first is none other than Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I unfortunately I started listening to this book this year, and then I DNF'd it, which I think is really sad. So I need to read this. Like, look at this quote on the back. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Like, it's just so good. Mr. Darcy, like, how do you, like, I've watched the movie. I loved the movie. So Pride and Prejudice we're adding. And then my next one also, which will be a part of the Screen to Book Adaptation Book Club, is Little Women. I have this beautiful copy with the scissors on it, and it also came with a little bookmark. I really want to watch the adaptation of this with Timothée Chalamet, but I told myself I had to read this first. So I feel like this would be a good, like, both of those classics kind of scream spring to me. So I'm thinking that I'm going to try to read those this spring. All right, we've got Pride and Prejudice, Little Woman. Next, another general fiction we have is Blue Sisters by Coco Mellers. I know that this is the author that wrote Cleopatra and Frankenstein, and I know that this is a story about sisters, and that's really it, but the cover is really what kind of sold me. This is a book that I've walked into the bookstore, I saw so many times, and then I just finally picked it up. This is actually one of the other books that I believe that I bought this in, or at the Daunt bookstore in London, which is cool, so I am very excited to read this one. I kind of like that I don't really know much about it. My camera's about to die, but the last few books that I have are also 2 fantasy books. The first, Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know anything about this book. I've only read Tress of the Emerald Sea by him. I loved it, and I need to get more into Brandon Sanderson, and this is the year that that will happen. And then lastly, we've got An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. The only reason why I haven't really picked this up is because I've heard that the next few books aren't as good as this first one, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't read this first book. So I'm definitely adding both of these to my list. Then lastly, the very last thing I want to read, which I have on my Kindle, is I want to start my Robin Hobbs journey. If you haven't heard, that's an epic fantasy, and the first is the Farseer trilogy, and I want to read at least that trilogy so that I can get to the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which is the second trilogy, and that's the one that I really want to read, but there's just something about my brain where I have to read it in the chronological order. Hopefully you can't hear my dad shoveling up there. But yeah, I definitely want to start my Robin Hobbs journey this year. I believe that they're on Kindle Unlimited. Most of them are. Alright guys, so thank you so much for watching. I want, if you got to this point, if you could leave a comment down below and let me know if there's any of these books that you want to read in 2026.